A 30,000-ton battleship is a floating citadel of steel designed to withstand torpedo impacts and heavy-caliber shell fire from miles away. It is built around contingency, backup generators, alternate command centers, and isolation valves for every critical system. Yet on the night of November 13, 1942, the Imperial Japanese Navy battleship Hiei was crippled by a storm of hits, among them at least one 8-inch shell that struck the ship's steering. This projectile did not detonate a magazine. It did not pierce the boiler rooms. It struck the steering gear room in the stern, flooding the compartment and jamming the hydraulic rams hard over. In 1 second of violence, the fastest battleship in the Japanese fleet lost the ability to choose its own direction. It became a drifting anomaly, forced into a relentless starboard circle that would turn it from a predator into a stationary target. The loss of the Hiei marked a pivotal shift in the naval war in the Pacific. She was the first battleship of the Imperial fleet to be sunk in combat, a psychological blow that resonated from the Solomon Islands to Tokyo. But before she sank, she endured one of the most chaotic surface engagements in history. The first naval battle of Guadalcanal was not a sterile artillery duel fought at the horizon. It was a knife fight in a dark room. American destroyers and cruisers collided with the Japanese formation in the pitch blackness of Ironbottom Sound, reducing the range to 0. At the center of this brawl was the Hiei. She was a Congo-class fast battleship, retrofitted for speed and night combat. Her silhouette was dominated by the distinctive pagoda mast, a towering superstructure of stacked platforms and searchlights that soared well over 100 feet above the waterline. This architectural feature gave her commanders an unparalleled view of the horizon, but in the close confines of the night battle, it became a liability. The pagoda mast was a magnet for incoming fire, trapping shells in its complex lattice and turning the command center into a firestorm. The engagement distances were so short that the Hiei could not bring her primary weapons to bear. Her main battery consisted of 8 14-inch guns, weapons designed to hurl 1,000-pound shells over 20 miles. When the American destroyer Laffey passed within 20 feet of the battleship, the Japanese gun crews could not depress the massive barrels low enough to target the smaller vessel. The physics of the engagement had inverted. The giant was helpless against the gnat because the gnat was too close. The Laffey raked the bridge of the Hiei with machine gun fire and light cannon shells, wounding Rear Admiral Hiroaki Abe and killing his chief of staff, Captain Suzuki Masakani, while the 14-inch guns fired uselessly overhead. The damage piled up through the night, but the ship stayed afloat and under power. What mattered most was the hit already written into her stern. The rudder locked hard over, forcing the circle no engine trick could break. When the sun rose on November 13th, the Hiei was revealed to American aircraft launching from Henderson Field. Unable to retreat, she steamed in a slow, agonizing circle, absorbing bomb and torpedo hits for hours. The captain, Nishida, argued fiercely against abandoning the ship. He believed the vessel could still be grounded or towed to safety. However, the damage control situation deteriorated as fires consumed the superstructure and the steering remained paralyzed. The embarked admiral eventually ordered the ship abandoned, overruling the captain. What followed is less clean than legend. The record fractures on what exactly finished her, whether she was hastened by her own side or simply bled out under air attack and flooding. The Hiei slipped beneath the surface in the evening, taking 188 men with her. She vanished into the deep water north of Savo Island, leaving behind a legacy of confusion and a debris field scattered by the violence of her final hours. For nearly 8 decades, the precise location of her hull remained unknown. The ocean floor in this sector is a graveyard of warships, a chaotic landscape of magnetic anomalies and false positives. To find the Hiei, a survey team would need to look past the legend of that pitch-black brawl and focus on the physics of a steel mountain falling through a mile of water. The search would not be for a ship, but for a specific signature of destruction hiding in the dark, around 3,000 feet, roughly 900 to 980 meters. At that depth, the ocean stops being a maritime environment and becomes a high-pressure physics chamber. The water column bears down with roughly 1,300 to 1,400 pounds per square inch, crushing any sealed airspace that survives, snapping fittings, warping lighter structures, and keeping the wreck in permanent night. The location of the sinking is as hostile as the depth. The narrow channel between Guadalcanal, Savo Island, and the Florida Islands is officially marked on charts as sound or strait, but to naval historians it is known by a far darker name, Ironbottom Sound. This designation is not a metaphor. It is a literal description of the seabed geology, which is paved with the steel of dozens of warships, more than 50 by many counts, lost during the 6-month campaign. The density of wreckage in this confined body of water creates a unique acoustic environment. The ocean floor is cluttered with the shattered remains of cruisers, destroyers, transports, and aircraft, creating a landscape of false positives that complicates any modern search effort. Navigating this underwater graveyard requires a precise understanding of the historical uncertainty. While the battle that claimed the Hiei was witnessed by thousands of men, the reports of her final position were contradictory. In the chaos of 1942, with the ship circling uncontrollably and under constant air attack, the navigation logs became fragmented. The battleship did not sink instantly. It drifted for hours, subjected to variable currents and the erratic thrust of its own engines. By the time the vessel disappeared, the coordinates recorded by the surviving crew were estimates based on dead reckoning in a featureless sea. This uncertainty created a search box covering hundreds of square miles of deep ocean. Searching for a single hull in Ironbottom Sound is a statistical challenge. The seabed is rugged, characterized by volcanic ridges and sediment flows that can mimic the sonar signature of a large ship. A surveyor must distinguish between a geological formation, a lost American cruiser, and the specific architecture of a Japanese fast battleship. The target is not just a needle in a haystack, but a specific needle in a stack of needles. In early 2019, the research vessel Petrel arrived on station to solve this problem. The ship was owned by the estate of Paul Allen and equipped with the most advanced deep ocean survey technology available to civilian science. The mission was not salvage in the traditional sense. There was no intent to raise the hull or recover artifacts. The objective was purely forensic. The team sought to locate the wreck to verify its identity and document its condition for history. This required a platform capable of holding a steady position on the surface while deploying sensors into the crushing depths below. The operating environment of Ironbottom Sound offers no quarter to equipment failure. A tether snapping at 3,000 feet means the loss of millions of dollars in hardware. A thruster failure on a submersible means the vehicle is claimed by the pressure. The survey team had to account for strong bottom currents that scour the sediment and obscure visibility. They had to filter out the noise of lesser wrecks, the debris from the heavy fighting that paved the approach to the battleship. The Hiei was the largest prize in this collection of lost steel. As the first battleship lost, her location held a specific gravity in the historical record. Finding her required piercing the veil of deep water and distinguishing her massive signature from the background noise of the battle. The ocean had held her for nearly 8 decades, wrapping the hull in a shroud of silence and pressure. Breaking that seal required a systematic elimination of the empty ocean, strip by strip, until the physics of the water revealed the anomaly hiding in the dark. In the deep ocean, light is a memory. Beyond a few hundred feet, the sun is extinguished, and the water becomes a wall of absolute blackness. To find a battleship resting on the abyssal plain, a survey team cannot rely on cameras or floodlights. They must use sound. The primary tool for this hunt is side-scan sonar, a technology that paints a topographic map of the seabed using acoustic pulses. A sensor array is towed through the water, emitting pings that travel outward, strike the bottom, and bounce back. Hard objects like steel reflect the sound with high intensity, creating a bright return. Soft mud absorbs the energy, appearing dark. The area behind a tall object remains silent, casting a long acoustic shadow that reveals the height and shape of the target. The research vessel Petrel deployed an autonomous underwater vehicle to conduct this acoustic sweep. This robot is a torpedo-shaped drone programmed to fly a precise grid pattern just above the seafloor. It operates without a tether, isolated from the surface ship, navigating on its own logic. It mows the lawn of the ocean, strip by strip, covering square miles of darkness with methodical patience. The data it collects is not a photograph. It is a waterfall of jagged lines and contrast, a digital mosaic that requires expert interpretation to separate geology from history. The challenge in Ironbottom Sound is the noise of the floor itself. Volcanic ridges can read like overturned hulls, and debris fields from 1942 scatter the bottom with confusing returns. The analysts have to burn down those false positives by hunting for naval geometry, straight lines, right angles, and the unnatural smoothness of armor plate. In late January 2019, the autonomous vehicle returned with a signature that broke the pattern. The sonar image showed a massive anomaly, a colossal disruption in the sediment that was too large to be a geological feature and too coherent to be a debris pile. The return indicated a hard, metallic object of significant length. The acoustic shadow suggested a high-relief structure, something rising steeply from the mud. The dimensions matched the scale of a capital ship. This was not a destroyer or a transport. This was a fortress. However, the sonar image presented a contradiction. The main mass was there, but the familiar topside silhouette was wrong. Too clean in some places, too chaotic in others. The distinctive superstructure that should have thrown a sharp, towering shadow simply wasn't there. The target was undoubtedly the Hiei, but the sound waves could not tell the surveyors if the ship was intact or shattered. The detection phase was complete. The autonomous vehicle had done its job, turning a box of empty ocean into a specific set of coordinates. But sonar can only tell you that something is there, not what the wreck has become. To move from a signature to a ship, the team had to trade echoes for eyes. They would need to drop a remotely operated vehicle into the crushing depth and put eyes on the steel. The acoustic map had found the grave, but it had not yet revealed the body. When the lights of the remotely operated vehicle finally cut through the darkness of the deep scattering layer, they did not reveal the towering pagoda mast of a Japanese battleship. Instead, they illuminated a flat, expansive plane of riveted steel stretching out into the gloom. It took the survey team a moment to process the geometry. They were not looking at the deck of the Hiei. They were looking at her keel. The battleship was resting completely upside down, inverted on the bottom of Ironbottom Sound. This upside-down posture is consistent with a roll during the sinking, but it is not a mechanical certainty. Large surface combatants of this era carried significant topside mass in towers, directors, masts, and turrets, and as flooding spreads, the ship's stability can collapse in seconds. Water rushing through open compartments creates free surface effects, shifting the center of buoyancy and robbing the hull of its righting moment. Once that balance is lost, the ship can roll through a full 180-degree arc and continue down inverted. During the descent, fragile upperworks may be crushed, scattered, or torn away, while the main hull settles into the sediment like a sealed grave. Navigating the drone along the hull, the team looked for confirming features. They found them in the ship's secondary battery and hull openings, class-specific details that separate naval architecture from wreckage. Upside down, some mounts and embrasures now hung above the sea floor, pointing aimlessly into the black water. Piece by piece, the arrangement matched a Congo-class fast battleship, turning a sonar anomaly into a named ship for the first time since 1942. As the vehicle moved aft, it confirmed the damage that had doomed the vessel. The rudders were visible, locked in the hard starboard turn that had trapped the ship in its fatal circle. The propellers were still in place, giant bronze screws that had driven the ship through the Pacific War. But as the survey team piloted the drone forward toward the bow, the hull suddenly ended. Where the long, tapered nose of the battleship should have been, there was only a jagged tear. A large forward section was missing, on the order of a quarter to a third of the hull, turning the wreck into a question as much as an answer. That absence has fueled two competing explanations. One is an internal blast, the kind of sudden violence that can rip plating outward and erase a bow in an instant. The other is a structural break driven by the physics of sinking, flooding, loss of stability, and bending loads as the ship rolled and fell, tearing stressed steel along a weakened line. With only limited imagery and no intrusive examination, the safer conclusion is that the bow separated sometime during the final sequence. But exactly how and exactly when remains uncertain. Whatever the trigger, the break was the final act of a process that began hours earlier. The Hiei had absorbed an estimated 85 shell hits during the night action. These impacts, ranging from 5-inch destroyer rounds to 8-inch cruiser shells, had ravaged the superstructure and perforated the unarmored sections of the hull. Yet none of these 85 hits had delivered a mortal blow to the buoyancy of the ship. The battleship remained afloat, a testament to the ruggedness of her construction and the damage control efforts of her crew. She was a mission kill, unable to steer or fight effectively, but she was not sinking. The end was deliberate in one sense. Hiei was abandoned because she could no longer be saved, but scuttling is a sharper claim, that her own side intentionally sank her, and the surviving accounts don't settle it cleanly. Some reconstructions describe an attempt to finish the ship. Others argue she was already dying from the damage and the strikes that kept coming, with any final push, if it happened at all, only riding on top of a collapse already underway. The wreck itself can show violence, holes, torn plating, crushed structure, but it cannot, by itself, assign blame with certainty. Torpedo damage amidships could reflect aerial attacks as easily as friendly fire, and without a detailed, published forensic report, the cleanest phrasing is the honest one. Hiei did not go down from a single cause, but from a cascade of damage that ended with abandonment and sinking. The survey mission, constrained by that uncertainty, faced the final limit of the operation. The wreck is not a salvage target. It is a sovereign immune vessel owned by the government of Japan and a designated war grave. There is no plan to lift the hull, recover the rudder, or disturb the sediment. The objective was to document the crime scene of 1942, to prove that the ship is there, and to analyze the physics of her loss. The data gathered by the acoustic sensors and the cameras is the only thing that will ever return to the surface. The steel itself belongs to the pressure and the silence. November 13, 1942 marked the closing of a specific window in naval history. For the first year of the war in the Pacific, the battleships of the Imperial Japanese Navy had operated with an aura of invincibility. They were the masters of the night, fast and heavily armed, capable of delivering devastating bombardment with impunity. The loss of the Hiei shattered this perception. It showed, in the bluntest possible terms, that even the heaviest armor can be beaten, not by a single perfect shot, but by the accumulation of damage from smaller, determined adversaries. The loss signaled that the era of uncontested surface supremacy was over, replaced by a brutal war of attrition where no ship was too large to fail. The human cost of this realization remains on the bottom of the Sound. When the Hiei slipped beneath the surface, she took her officers and men with her to the sediment. These sailors did not abandon their posts in the engineering spaces or the magazines, even as the ship turned over. They remain with the vessel today, encased in the steel hull that served as their final station. For the survivors, the loss was a different kind of burden. Captain Nishida, who had fought to save his ship until he was physically removed from the bridge, faced a legacy of regret. He was relieved of command and retired to the reserve, bearing the weight of being the first captain to lose a battleship of the Emperor. The wreck site is a war grave, and that status draws a hard line around what exploration can be. Petrel's work was observation only, documenting, not touching, treating the hull as a tomb rather than a target. The location has been confirmed even if the exact coordinates remain withheld, and the site is protected from salvage. In the decades since 1942, Ironbottom Sound has become a place of silence. The violence of the naval battles has been replaced by the slow, quiet work of corrosion and time. The Hiei rests upside down, her guns pointing into the dark water, her broken bow lying nearby as a testament to the forces that tore her apart. She is no longer a weapon of war. She is a monument to the ferocity of the Guadalcanal campaign. The discovery of the wreck provides a final chapter to the confused reports of that night. It resolves the questions of where she sank and how she broke. It confirms the testimony of the men who saw her go down and corrects the charts that had been wrong for 77 years. The Hiei is no longer missing. She is on permanent patrol in the deep, a steel giant guarding the entrance to the Sound, holding her formation in the cold darkness of the Solomon Sea.